Login system. Everyone, welcome to week 4 in Sim, and the topics are CSS lists, background properties, that's image background properties, and box model. Now, I have here a template which we're going to use to illustrate these topics that we've learned from the class lesson. So if you have any questions along the line as we illustrate these topics, please feel free to ask. And I want to be sure that we have complete understanding of these concepts at the end of the lesson. All right, now I have written I have this from this template. I have an import statement here that I will explain. So this is a CSS fonts library from Google. Now, I'm going to explain how I got this CSS font library. So if you want to add more fonts options to your web page, we've looked at the different text properties so far from the previous lessons, and we've seen how to add fonts to an element. But this is also another way we can use to add fonts to our web page. Now, this is an import statement on the CSS style sheet, not in the head area. Now, if I had an external style sheet, I would also make sure that this import statement is in the external style sheet and not in the head area. Now, there are different ways we use to import different contents or useful libraries for web development. Now, this is just one simple and basic way. So I'm just going to show you how I got this link from Google. So like I said, this is a fonts option I got from Google. It's a Google Fonts, and I'm going to show you how I got the link from the Google Fonts library. So to get fonts, there are different libraries online that we can get fonts from, but this particular one is from Google, and it's highly recommended because they have more options. So far from experience, they have more options that pleases or that are good for web pages. So I would go to Google. So the website is fonts.google, but I'm just going to type it here to be sure. All right, so if you go to the web page, fonts.google.com, you will find the several options of fonts. Now, right here, I have several different options. And if you're looking for a specific font, you could search for the font name here, and then you get the fonts if it's available on Google. But what I want to do is just show you how to get the fonts and the way you can add it to your style sheet. So let's say I want this font, and I'm going to click on this one, and you see a display of the how to style the fonts. So this is, for example, the language of you want to write your text in, and this also example is how the size of the fonts will display. So you can see the size here, which is font size. So if I type here, it's going to display according to the size I specify on this input here. All right, now I want to get this font, and although I have already imported one, so I'm just showing you how to get one for yourself. I will click on the get fonts, and then it will give me two options: if I want the embedded code or I want to download the font directly on my system. So I want to get the code since I'm using it for development. And now here you can decide to choose if you want it for Android device, iOS, so it depends on the device you're developing. And I want it for web, that I want the link. That's if I want to use the link like I have for my style sheets, or I want to use the CSS imports embedded code. So what I have here is the CSS imports embedded code. And if you want to use the link, all you have to do is copy this code. And once you copy the code, you come to your head area and paste the link in your head area. Then you can make use of the fonts on your HTML file. So to make use of the fonts is the same way we've always done. But like I said in the last slide lesson, there are some fonts that might not be available for your browser. And in order for it to be available, you can get the fonts like this in the library. So how I got this one, I used the CSS imports embedded style, and I selected the copy code here, and when I clicked on it, it gave me the link to paste. Now you can see here it's going to give you the whole style, the elements and the import statements alone. But what I need here, since I already have the style elements open here, all I have to do is copy the import statement itself. And after copying this, you will come to your page on your CSS style sheet and you paste it directly on your CSS style sheet. Now, this would enable you to make use of the fonts you have selected from the Google Fonts libraries. So what I have selected there is the Google style, the fonts from Google. So I would make use of this fonts for my heading. So let's go back to the page. Now I also have comments for the different topics and spaces for illustrating them. All right, so we're going to create first a heading. We would apply the fonts, and we'll just look at colors as well, just to refresh our memories. What we've done so far using colors and then applying this fonts we've selected from Google to the header. All right, so I'm going to start with the page one.
Sorry, Edmond, we can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I will speak louder. Can you hear me now? Is it louder?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, so I want to apply the fonts to this heading, but first we need a heading. So I'm going to type here School of Programming. Now, in the current week 4 lesson, we've seen how to use div elements to create containers. So the div elements are mostly used as a container for other elements or content. Now, I want to also show you another element we can use as a container, but this is mostly used or best used for text. So if you want to style or you want to style a specific text from a group of sentences, or a specific word from a group of sentences, or you want to isolate a particular word out from a sentence and add specific styles to it, or if you want to just have an empty space and then maybe use your JavaScript to output specific text on your page, we can make use of the span element. So the span element it basically works like the div element, but mostly it's best used for text. So I'm going to type span. And what I want to do here is I want to use this span element to isolate specific text that I want to apply specific colored styles to the text. So to make sure that I have different text colors, I'm using the span element, and I'm going to continue the name, which is School of Programming. So I'll just use the enter key here to make sure that the whole text displays on this part of the screen. Okay, so School of Programming, and I'm going to have another span element. Have and I'll have another span element. There's some software. So remember, all these are in the H1 elements because I'm trying to create a unique heading. So if I save this and refresh my page, all you see is the text. You won't see the span element because it's just a container for now that we haven't applied any specific style to. So by the time we start applying the colors, you're going to see how they isolate the text and make sure that the property for the style takes effect on only that particular isolated text. All right, so first I want to apply a general style here for the heading. So I'm going to use the H1 elements for the press. And what we want to do is we want to look at also from just like a review for the previous class, we want to apply a general color. I want to apply a general color. So remember, we have an imported font, and we're going to look at that too here. So first, let's select the weight of the fonts. So the font weight should be bold. And I want the text to be aligned to the center. Now, this is where we apply you can apply the fonts before any other property, but I'm just going according to the way I feel. So here we want to add the font property. So we use the font family property. And now we don't have the font name here that we've imported. So you can type it knowing that you have imported the fonts itself. So in the quotes, I'm going to add the fonts. So recall from the previous lesson, we can, after adding the fonts, we want to also give a fallback font to the browser, just in case the browser is not able to display this selected font. So we have to add a fallback, and we're going to use the default sans serif that the browser always recognizes. So this would be the default if the browser is not able to recognize this font. And so I'm going to save this. So we'll see what we've done so far. So we have the text centered, we have the font weight bold, though it's always going to be bold, but this makes it more unique and fine, even though it's already the H1 heading. All right, so let's add more styles to this heading to make sure it's better. I'm going to increase the size. Font size, I will use 3 here. As well, add the color. can add the text shadow. So we are just using every property we've learned from the previous class. Just to refresh our memories on these properties. All right, so now we have the styles we've selected here applied to the heading. So let's see how the span element works. We go back to the span elements, and now we want to start adding the specific styles. But here I want to add colors. So I'm going to use an inline style to make the whole documents more neat. So I want to add the different colors in the page because we already have a general color. So let's design this heading folder. So I'm going to use the inline style. Say style. And what the property I want is the color.
Sorry, Mr. Eddie.
Okay, I can hear you.
Sorry, please. I don't know if you're using a headphone. I'm finding it a bit difficult to hear you.
I think I would disconnect it to make sure.
And you are cracking up a bit. Please.
All right, I'm sorry about that. All right, I guess it's better now.
Yes, it's better. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm very sorry. Okay, so I was adding the colors, the unique colors to each span element, and here I want to add the color. So I'm going to save and refresh this so see. So we have the blue color that we set in the span element being applied to the programming text because we isolated the programming text inside the span elements and applied this unique color to it. So you see how it works. So like I said, the span is like a container and it's just mostly used for text. So we're going to add more colors to the other span elements. So if I save this, we're going to have a yellow and a red color. So I like red color. Right. So you see this heading now looks unique, and because of the span element, we have different styles applied to the different text on the heading. So we could use this for other purposes. You can apply other type of text property styles to your text. All right, so let's go next to the content. That's the container that we'll be using to illustrate the rest of the topics. So for us to have two containers and position these containers properly on the page, it's best to put these two containers in a parent container where we would apply a display property that would make sure that the containers are styled properly. Now, this is a format you want to apply to mostly situations like this when developing. So if you're not using the container property, that's the div element, you could as well make sure that whatever parent element you have on your HTML document should be where you apply the display property. So because I don't want to apply the display property, so let's say we have the containers. We have container 1 and then we have container 2. That's div element 1, div element with classes, right? Div elements with a class 1, div elements with a class 2. Now, for us to be able to position the elements or the containers properly on the web page, we have to apply a display property on the parent elements that these two elements will be in. So let me show you an example. So let's say I have a div here, and I'm going to call this container 1. No, I'm going to call this box 1. And I have another container. I'm going to call this box 2. Now, there are no contents yet in these elements. So let's add contents to them. Okay, so for the first container, we want to have a list. So we looked at lists before in the previous lesson. I want to have an unordered list. I'll use the UL and let's have list items inside. I'm going to call this item 1. And this item 2. And this item 3. Right, so for the second container, I'm just going to type the text. I'll just, since we need a content to display inside this container for us to tell where the container is, I'm going to type here box 2. So you can see that the containers, or there are no visible borders, but we have the contents inside and they displayed in a block display. That's just the way it is on the HTML document. The box 1 displays above the box 2. So for us to be able to position these elements, we have to apply a display property on whatever parent container or element they are located. So if we do not have a parent container here, what we have as the parent container or parent element would be this body element, which means if we add a display property, it's going to affect everything inside the body element. So for the next element we create, the body element will also affect that element as well. And we don't want that on our web page. So in order for us to make sure that these two containers have unique display, we have to put them in their own parent container. And that's where the div element is very important. So I'm going to create another div, and this will be the container or the parent container for these two div containers we've created. So I'm going to put a close tag here to make sure that we have the div elements with the classics box1, box2 inside the parent container, which is why I have named the class container. So you can see that this is one way of understanding, the best way to understand how to position elements. So it's one of the important use of the div elements. It's helped us to structure our web page in unique ways or whatever ways we would like to do it without affecting other elements on the web page. All right, so now we have this like this, but we want to make sure that these containers are visible, and we want to add borders and other unique properties to make sure that they display well on the web page. Right, so we'll go to our style sheet. So first, we want to look at how to give a good background to the whole web page. And I'm going to do this on the body element, since the body element holds all the contents and elements we have on the page. So I want this particular background to be on the body element. So I'm going to apply it on the body element. So here I want to add the background image using the background image property. And in my URL, I'm going to specify the path to the image. So right here on my folders, I have images that I will be using for this illustration. So for this background image, I want to make use of the image called background.png. So I would specify on the paths that I have an image in my images folder. So remember how we reference files from the last lesson? I want to reference this background image from the images folder. And where I am currently we are in the index.html, and we are not in any other folder. We're in the root directory where we have the images folder. So we're just going to direct path to the images folder directly. And the name of the folder now is images, and the name of the file we want to reference is called background.png. So I'm going to type this here. Now save this and see that the image is displaying as the background over behind our contents. So let's make sure that this image is displayed properly. We have learned from the class lesson the different properties we use to position images as background properly on the page. So I want to use a background position, though it might be displaying well here, but depending on the image you have. So I want to make sure that the whole image is displayed properly on this page. So I'm going to use the background position, and I want to make sure that the image is centered. And I want to make sure that the image is the cover of the background, the whole body element. So I'm going to use the property background size and set it to cover. So I'll save this. Might not make much difference, but you can see the image displaying properly now. So I have the whole original image displaying as the background on the web page. All right, so we have the styles not displaying properly. Let's apply some styles to the list element. So I'm going to call the list tag. going to use the list style tab and set it to none, because we want to use images for the marker. So we set the type to none to take out the markers. And then I want to use a particular image, which I have in my images folder called marker.png. So just like we have done for the background, but here we're going to use the list style image property. And in the URL, we're going to specify the image we want to use. So I as well have this in my images folder. And the name is marker.png. So I'll save this. Now, there's one important note you should take for when styling this list style image. You first of all have to make sure that the image you're using has a smaller resolution. So you have to resize the image before applying it to the elements, because for list markers, you can see that it does not have to be big, right? So it's a marker and you don't want it to be displaying bigger than the list item itself. So you have to make sure that the image itself is a smaller image that you can easily add to or use as the marker. All right. So I'm going to go over to the next. Right, so let's style the container that we have used as the parent container, which is called container. So we're using the class that we've given inside the div. So to use the class, we use a dot and the name of the class called container. And now we want to make sure that the items or the containers, the child containers that are inside, which is this and box 1 and box 2, we want to make sure that they display properly side by side on the page. So for us to do this, we use the display property. And now there are different values for these display properties, but to make sure that you want to make sure that this container is a flexible container where you can design it or style or position the elements inside this container flexibly. We are going to use the flex value. So we set the display to flex, and we want to make sure now that the items, because after setting the display to flex, this just positions the elements side by side, ready for our positioning. So we want to make sure that these elements are positioned properly. So there's a property called align items. So what this align items does is that it's align items that has that are displayed either at the top or bottom of the parent container, and make sure that it displays on any of the value you give here. So for example, if we set the value to center, it makes sure that if we have any elements in this container, that's the parent container, at the top or bottom, it brings it to the center. So this makes sure that the item is displayed in the center. So I'm going to save this first. So it makes sure that the items are not displayed at the top or bottom, but at the center. Now, we also have to want to position the items or the elements inside the parent container that are probably on the left and right, to make sure that they are displayed on the center as well. And the property for that is justify content. Displayed at the middle of the container. Them without a space and or that these styles are applied to each of these containers, we would use the classes we've created for the containers. So we're going to first of all style the box1. So recall we gave a class for the first container inside the parent, and second is box2. So let's start with box1 first. So box1, and then for us to be able to see these containers visibly properly on the page, we are going to add it to the container. So property and format, I want the border of the border width to be 5px, and I want it to be solid, and I want the color to be a light shade of brown. So I'm going to use a hexadecimal color. So I'll save this, and then we have the border for box1. All right, so let's make sure that the box1 is completely styled before moving to box2, or we could just do the same for box2. Change this to box2, and also change the color for box2. So I think this should be black. All right. Now we have the containers. So what we have here are the containers being sized according to the contents. So it's the content, the borders or the container, they we want to set a specific height and width for the container. So we're going to start applying that on the classes we've created. So for the first container, we are going to add the width. So recall from the class lesson, if I'm only going to use this width property here because the page, we are not looking at the responsiveness for now. But if you want to make sure that elements or containers like this are responsive on the web page, you use the max width property. So I just want to set the width, and I want the width to be 200px. And I want the height to be 200px as well. I want a square container, so I'm going to refresh this, and we have that for the box1. So I'll do the same thing for box2. Save. Now we have equal height and width for both containers. So we want to make sure that these containers are unique. And as well, we want to make sure that there's a space between them. So I'm going to add a space. Remember, there are different ways. Remember, we've looked at margin. So we're going to use a margin for this, but there are different ways we can the display property the display property which we had in the parent container for justify content. So recall that this justify content makes sure that contents that are horizontally displayed. So it chooses a position for contents horizontally on the parent. I want to make sure that there is also space between these containers. In the parent, from the parent container, we can change this value to space between. So I'll delete this to make sure that we see the whole value. So we remember we have flex end, flex start, space around, space between. So there are different values that we can use to position the containers. Each of them has their own unique spaces they give or position they apply to the elements. But here we are using center to make sure that it's horizontally centered. So I would use a margin for my box 2 to create a space between them. So remember, we have margin top, bottom, left, and right. So specifically, I want a margin right. So it gives a space. So remember, the margin usually are the space. The margin are the spaces around a particular element. So the space around each element is known as the margin, or it's called the margin. So I want the space on the left side of this container to be 200 px. So when I save it, it gives us the same width that we've selected, 100 px, using the margin property. So this makes the containers displayed side by side and have a margin space of 200 px. All right, so let's add more properties to our box 1. Now we want to add a background for the box 1. So just like we've done for the other properties, we use here the background image for the to use an image for our background. So I'm going to use background image property. And I have an image that I have saved in my images folder called container. So I would reference the image. So always remember to include the file extension for the image. Your image may be JPG or JPEG. So mine is PNG, so I'll specify that. I'm going to save and refresh, and I have an image which is a carton container for my box 1. Now, to also make sure that this image is displayed properly, I'm going to make use of the display properties too as well. So first I want the position to be center, and then I also want to make sure that the list item or the list inside this container is displayed in the middle. So first, let's make use of the background position, and to make sure that the image is centered, and then we can to make sure that the content inside the box is displayed at the center of the container. So I want to use the display property again, as we've used before, and make sure that it's flexible for us to apply the other properties to position the item where we want it. So I want the list item or the list elements inside this container. I want it to be in the middle. So I want to align the items to the center. I'll save this and refresh the page, and we see that we've aligned the items to the center. So I'm just making sure that this box container has a more realistic effect. I want to apply a shadow to it. So recall we've learned how to apply shadows to text, but this shadow, we want to apply a shadow to this element, this container element. So there are two ways: whether we're applying a shadow to text, or we want to apply it to a particular element that is not a text. We use the box shadow property. So just like we have for the text shadow, the way we set the axis for the shadows is the same thing we do for the box shadow. So I'm going to set the values, but here I won't be using positive values because I just want to make sure that the positioned in the shadow is positioned in a very strategic direction, so the light effects would be visible. So let's try it without the shadow position first. So let's say we have 10 for the x-axis, and then we have 10 as well for the y-axis. So these are the direction of the shadow, and then the shadow itself, let's say I want it more visible, so I want 20 px. Now, also as the shorthand, we are going to include a color. So I want a color that is not so visible. So I'm going to use the RGBA color. This gives me more option. So I'll set the red to 0, the green to 0, blue to 0. So I don't want any of these colors, but I want something that is a bit dark. So this is the light to give if it's bright or dark. So I want something a bit dark. No. I'm going to save this first and refresh the page. And you can see the shadow is displayed, but realistically, we can't have a shadow where the light is bright. So I want to make sure that this shadow is displayed on the other side of this box, which is the darker area. So to do that, I'm going to set this with a negative value. So this means that if I keep increasing this with a positive value, the shadows will be going according to the direction I set, which is for the x-axis, is going to come out more on this end. And if I increase the y-axis, it's going to come out more on this end. And I also increase the blur, we're going to see more of the blur or the shadow itself. But now what I'm doing is I am taking it back to the other axis. So I use the negative value for the x and negative value for the y. So I'm going to save this. And you see the shadow now is displaying behind the light. So this looks more realistic. And it has actually brought the container to life. So these are just stuffs where we can add, or styles we can add to containers depending on what we are designing. All right, so we're going to move straight to the box 2 to complete our style for box 2. So I want to align the text box shadow to the center. So I'll use text align and save. or we can do this from the inline. So let me do this in the inline because I'm going to add other styles to the box too. So you can do it where you like, but I just want it out here because I want to explain something I'll be doing here without any other property. All right, so for our box 2, we have the margins left as 200, and I'm going to give it an outline. So outline is just like the border, but it's just basically a line that makes a container or any other element stands out. So just like the border, we can set the shorthand, use the shorthand properties or shorthand values. And yeah, I want the outline to have a width of 2px. And I'm going to make the style dashed and a red color. So I'll save this, and we have it displayed that way. So now if we want to apply margin or padding, for example, I want to add padding to the box 2. So I'll do that here. I want them all listed in one. So recall the padding is usually the space inside the elements itself. So for example, we have this container and the padding are the spaces inside the container and the margin are the spaces outside the container. So if we want to apply padding, now we have a syntax we use to give these values. Now sometimes you might see something like 5px, let's say 10px, okay, 20px, 10px, 20px. So one of the best ways to understand what this means or how these values are applied is that you have to look at it in a clockwise order. So if we say 5px, it means we are starting from the top. So clockwise, let's say we're starting from 12. So we're starting from the top, and then 20px would be your right, let's say 3, and then 10px would be the bottom. So we say 6, and then 20px here will be for left. So let's say 9. So you can look at it as a clockwise order. I believe this should make it easier for you to understand. So if we want to apply unique padding spaces around these elements inside this container, we can make use of this. But if let's say we take out this one, the last one, which is meant to be for left, if we are going about it as a clockwise format, it means that we started from top, right, and we ended at bottom. So which means the values we've given, we apply to the areas we've specified. Now, by default, if you do not specify any other side, like let's say we have 5px for top and bottom, sorry, 5px for top, 20px for right, and 10px for bottom. Now, by default, usually we expect that the left and right should have equal values. So sometimes you might see that the left would have a 20px space, but I'm not going to complicate this explanation with that. So it's rarely you come across something like that. But what we're going to be doing here is we're just looking at how the values are applied to the sides. So if we have 4, it means top, right, bottom, left, a clockwise direction. So I'm going to take out all these other values. So if we have just two, it means it's top and right. So it's going to take according to the value we give and the direction. So yeah, I just want a 5px padding for all sides. So I'm not specifying which of the side. I just use one value, and this is going to apply to all sides of the container. So I'm going to save this, and I'll refresh. And it's not big enough, but if I increase the size of the padding, so let's say 20, you're going to see it keeps increasing, but that's not what we want. So let's just make the container not too big. So we stick to 5px. So now we see the difference. All right, so we are going to look at how to calculate the box model calculation for the containers we've created so far. So recall from the class lesson that the box model calculation is for elements. If we want to calculate the total width and height of a particular element. So here we want to calculate the height and total height and width for each containers that we've created. So we're going to calculate for box 1 and box 2. And the box model calculation consists of everything that makes up the height and every space we've used, every space property that makes up the height and width of the container. So for example, we have here for box 1, we have first the width. So we're going to take the width for box 1. So let me say box 1. I'm going to do this in the comments. So box 1 will be equal to and we'll start with the width. So the width here is 200px for box 1, sorry. And we're just going to use the value just as it's given. And then we have next the so I want to make sure we calculate first the width for box 1. So I'll say box 1 width. So the first there is let's take it according to the order it is. Sorry. So we don't get confused. So we're calculating the width for box 1, and we're going to start from the border. So first we have the border left and the border right for this width calculation. So now when we give the border value like this, it means that all sides are equal. It means the left and the right, that's the height and the width of this border, the sides of the border are 5px equally. So, but what we're looking at here is we're calculating the width alone of this box 1. So we're going to take 5px for left and 5px for right. So it means this border here is 5px wide, and this border here is 5px wide, since the value is equal for all sides. So we're going to say the box, the border left plus border right, we are going to add the value, which is 5 plus 5. And next we want to add the content itself, the content width. So what we gave for the whole width of the content itself, that's the elements, this container is 200 px. So we're going to use 200 here. And next we want to check for padding, but we don't have padding for this box 1, so that will come in for box 2. So since we don't have any padding, we won't be adding any padding. So we're going to end it here. All right, so let's look at the height. So for the height, we have border top and border bottom. Since we're looking at just the height, not the width this time, you're only taking the height of the content, the element itself, the heights. Now, the first thing we have there is border top and border bottom, which is 5px. So we still have 5 plus 5. And then the height we gave for this container itself is 200px. So now, if let's use this example for box 2. So let's say we are calculating the padding too as well. Let's say we have a padding and we want to calculate the padding. What we have here is same as the border. We have just one value for all sides. So we're going to make sure that if we're adding the padding to the height and left, we will be adding plus 5 for left and plus 5 for right. Same thing goes to for the height. Plus 5 for left, for bottom or top, plus 5 for the top. So these are all the properties we take into consideration when calculating the box model. So I'm going to end this class here because of time. And if we have any questions, please feel free to ask now before we end the class.
Good evening, Mr. Eddie.
All right, good evening, sir.
Oh, thank you very much. How are you doing?
Fine, sir.
Please, I really wanted to ask about the images. I'm sorry I wasn't in the last class. I don't know if you touched it in the last class.
Okay.
Doesn't mean you have to create a new folder outside of the Atom software and import it into the Atom software. Like put in your images and then import it into the Atom software.
Okay. Yes.
For you to be able to
let's look at it this way. Now, I want to add these images to my web page. First of all, I have to save and get the images first. Maybe you have the images on your system already, or you want to download it from the internet. But once you get this image, you want to save it in a folder. Now, this is my project part that I have this folder where I have the HTML documents that we write all these lines of code to display on the web page. You understand to that part, right? Sorry, are you following me?
I'm following you. I do.
Okay, all right. So now, next is I want to have folders that hold all the related files that I want to use for my web page. So now, for your question, which is images, if you want to have images on the web page, it's best to have the images inside a folder that is located in the main development or the main directory. So just like we have for this CSS, where though we created the CSS inside the Atom application, but the images from your file explorer, you can move the images you want to use into this project folder, but inside this images folder. So it's from this images folder you're going to start using or referencing the images on your HTML documents. So first you must get the image, and then you have to move or copy the image to this images folder. I don't know if that's clear enough.
Yes, it is. Can I ask the second question?
Okay, sure.
Okay, so recently I've been really having a very difficult time trying to I noticed that you are making use of the embedded method when it comes to your CSS.
Okay.
And you also have a link to a style sheet. I'm seeing your link, your real style sheet.
Yes.
So recently I was finding it difficult to find the pathway to my CSS document. I was using the link method and creating my CSS styling on a different style sheet so I can link it up, but it wasn't responding. You get? So now you are using the two method. I mean, you're using a style sheet. You have a link to the style sheet. I can see it, and you are using the embedded method. So are you seeing both of them work together, or I don't really get?
Okay, so do you
get my question?
Yes, I understand very well. So for clarification, I am using the embedded style so that we can have all the contents on one page in order for us to easily navigate through the page. So if I want to use the external style sheet, let's say I open this external style sheet here. So I have a little content here, and I have to, whenever I need to write a particular property, I will have to start clicking from, let's say I have this H1 here, and I want to apply a style to this H1. So I'll come to here and type H1 and start writing the styles. So I feel it might be too much of a navigation for us. That's why I'm using the embedded style, so we can see all the styles in one page. I don't know if that's clear enough. Then
yes, it is.
Now
go ahead.
I'm minding that I'm using the style element or the embedded style. It doesn't affect this, or this link style here doesn't affect this from displaying. Now I can still take out this and save it, and if I go back to the web page and refresh, everything is still there because I don't have any style from the external style sheet.
Oh, beautiful. Please, I just have one more question. Sorry. So I mean, it might look out of place, but you know,
everything is
the embedded style. You get? So obviously, what I'm trying to really point out is, if I choose to do the embedded style, there will be no need for proper, referencing using the style sheet or the link elements, right? You get the question?
Yes, if you're using the embedded style, though it depends. Yes, it depends on the kind of page you're
I
designing.
get.
So
For instance,
maybe
if you want to reference an image, you would have to reference it properly for it to display on the web page, right?
oh yes, yes.
So, well,
So
in this case, I'm saying if there is need to, there will be no need to go about referencing if you are using the embedded method like you do when you make use of the link element.
yeah, I still use the referencing. So you can see here that I reference these images that are on the web page now from this embedded style sheet. So in the embedded style sheet, all I have to do is reference it that I am currently in the index.html file, and I don't have to come out from any folder or navigate to any other folder. So I know that I'm currently in this index.html, and when I'm referencing, I reference the file from any of the folder. For example, the images folder, and then the name of the image. But if I'm using the external style sheet, for example, and I want to reference an image, right? If I want to reference an
Yeah.
image, I would have to come out from the folder. So that's why I explained last lesson that before you reference any file, you have to look at where you are first. So it will give you more understanding of where you're going to. So now, before I'm going to reference any image, I want to look at where I am. So I'm currently inside the main.css, and the main.css is inside the CSS folder. So in order for me to reference this image that is inside this images folder, for example, I want to reference the marker.png. So I have to come out first from this folder by doing, how do you do that? So we use the double dot and the /. So this first of all makes sure that I am out from the CSS folder. Out from the CSS folder, and then I want to go into the images folder to reference this marker image. So I would now type the images folder that I am entering the images folder. And then I want to reference the name or the file called marker. Since I'm already in the images folder, now I can confidently reference the file marker.png. And this will be successful if I am actually referencing this image as my background for my H1. But mind you, you have to make sure that this main.css must be properly referenced in your style sheet, in your link style elements. So for me to make sure that referencing works properly, I have to come back here and reference the style sheets that I have done that. So I'm going to make sure that now, remember, you have to tell where you are first. I'm in the index.html file, which is in the root directory. So I don't have to come out from any folder since I'm already in the root directory, but I want to reference the CSS style sheet, which holds the image or the style for my H1. So remember, what we included here as the background was for the H1. So to make sure that the H1 has that style, I have to reference it here. And to reference it, we are in the index.html. So I'm going to take out all this. And now I want to go to that main.css where I have that style. So I'll enter the CSS folder. Because I am not in any other folder, I'm in the root directory. So you don't come out from the root directory. Instead, we look for the folder that we want to reference the file. So now it's in the CSS folder. So that's why I will type the CSS first. And then the name of the file, which is main.css. Now save. So because I have embedded style here, the style would not have any effect on my H1. unless I take out the H1 style. So if I take this out, then it would not override the main.css style. So this might not make sense, but you see, the image itself is the background of the H1. So I don't know, is this okay? Is this enough for you?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks, yes, I appreciate it.
Okay. All right. So because of time, is there any other question? All right. So if you have any more challenges, please feel free to reach out to me on the WhatsApp group. And the last assignment that was submitted, as the current assignment you have submitted, has already been graded, and you can go to your dashboard to check for your assignments. Now, this is also another important information. So we noticed that most of our codes are having similar styles with other students. So I want to encourage us to always try to write our own codes by ourselves. It's to help you to learn faster and help you to encounter challenges that you would learn from as well. So if you're not encountering any challenges, then I don't think you're learning, because programming, you must have challenges. There's no programmer that hasn't encountered a bug or any particular problem before. That's how we learn. So always try to write your codes yourself. Do not copy codes, and read the assignment questions properly before answering. All right, so I wish you all success in your assignments, and have a lovely weekend ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Eji.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.